There I could marvel my birthday. So he says now, and he was beginning to enjoy, marvel, he was beginning to wonder and enjoy his birthday. But suddenly he says, away, my birthday away, but the weather turned around. Suddenly there was a change in weather. So now a twist. Okay, a very pleasant picture now, but suddenly something else has happened. Let's see what. In stanza 5. It turned away from the blithe country and down the other air, and the blue altered sky streamed again a wonder of summer with apples, pears, and red currants. And I saw in the turning so clearly a child's forgotten mornings when he walked with his mother through the parables of sunlight and the legends of the green chapels. And the twice, I'm going on to stanza 6, because here you can see that there is no full stop after chapels, and the line is just continuing on to the next stanza. And what do we call this? This is called enjambment. E-N-J-A-M-B-M-E-N-T. Enjambment is when a line doesn't end at the end of a stanza, but it runs on to the next stanza. So here we have an enjambment, so that's why I cannot stop with stanza 5. So it just goes on. And the legends of the green chapels and the twice told fields of infancy, that his tears burned my cheeks and his heart moved in mine. Going back to the beginning of stanza 5, what does he say? He said that something changed and it turned away from the blithe country and down the other air. So he says that from this atmosphere of his 30th birthday, of this autumn day, of this rainy day, suddenly there is a change and there is a different kind of sky now, a blue altered sky, and there is summer with apples and pears and red currants. And I saw in the turning so clearly a child's forgotten morning. So now he is suddenly transported to his childhood memories. So in the introduction I had mentioned that in the poems of Dylan Thomas there is a blending of the past and the present. So here you can see it so clearly. As he is talking about the present of the autumn season, suddenly he says, everything changed and I see before me the blue sky of the summer, and all the trees are full of fruits, apples. You can see the color, the red apples and the yellow pears and the red currants. And then I saw the turning so clearly, a child's forgotten mornings. So he talks about his own childhood, when the mornings that he had forgotten. For many years maybe he didn't even think of the time when he was a child. That happens, when we are so busy and engrossed in our daily life, we don't often think of our childhood or the years that went by. Something should happen for us to suddenly remember all that. Same way here, as he walks, suddenly he remembers the forgotten mornings when he walked with his mother through the parables of sunlight. So he remembers the walks that he took with his mother through the parables of sunlight. Now what is a parable? Parable is a biblical story, a story from the Bible. The small stories that Christ said in order to teach people things, to convey morals to them. And so he says parables of sunlight. So maybe he is just talking about how he used to walk with his mother through these sunlit mornings, and the stories that his mother must have told him, and the legends of the green chapels and the twice told fields of infancy. So green chapels, again, maybe the greenery around him, or maybe altogether when he looks back he feels that the whole thing is holy. All those wonderful moments he spent with his mother, listening to her stories, walking through the sunlight, all that, and the legends of the green chapels, in the sense the legends of the heroes of Wales, the Welsh stories, the folk tales, all of them come back to his memory. And the twice told fields of infancy. Why the twice told fields of infancy? One, because those are experiences that he truly lived through, and twice, because now he is remembering them all over again. That is why twice told fields of infancy. And thinking of that, suddenly he starts crying, and he says it is he that is crying, that is the child is the one who's crying for the forgotten mornings. But then the grown up and the adult poet, he feels those tears on his cheeks. You can see that the two are one. See how beautifully he blends the past and the present once again. He went away and now he has come back once again. That his tears burned my cheeks and his heart moved in mine. Who is this he? It is the child. And it is, of course, it is himself. And so the memories evoke all sorts of emotions in his mind, and it brings tears to his eyes. And the tears that flow from the eyes of the boy, the little boy, this poet can feel on his cheeks. And stanza 6 continues. These were the woods and the river, where a boy in the listening summertime of the dead whispered the truth of his joy to the trees and the stones and the fish in the tide. And the mystery sang alive, still in the water and singing birds. So he looks around and he says, these were the very woods and the river and the sea where I used to roam around when I was a little boy. In the listening summertime of the dead, whispered the truth of his joy. So summertime of the dead, maybe he's talking about the past time, the past summers that are dead. And when he was a little boy, he used to talk and communicate with the trees and the stones and the fish. And Dylan Thomas, his own childhood, now this is quite autobiographical, because it is said that he used to spend most of his time when he was a little child roaming around in the fields and in the countryside. So he must have spent many hours in solitude, talking to the trees and listening to the birds and fishing and looking at the fish in the water and all that. And so that's why he says, listening in summertime of the dead whispered the truth of his joy to the trees and the stones and the fish in the tide. And the mystery sang alive, still in the water and the singing birds. So those days, everything was full of mystery, and when he was a child, he understood some of those mysteries. Now this reminds me of the Immortality Ode of Wordsworth, when Wordsworth says that when he was a child, he had a better communication and a very strong bond with nature. There was a special kind of a luminous, a kind of an aura that covered everything, that enveloped everything around him. He could find joy in everything that he saw, in a flower, in a tree, in a leaf, in a bird. Everything made him happy, because those days he could understand the language of nature better. And many poets have repeated this idea of how when you are a child, God is very close to you, because you have just come from the abode of God. You have just come from heaven, and so you still retain some memories of your heavenly abode. But as you progress, as you get engulfed and mired down in the pains and cares and pressures of daily life, you forget everything of the past. You forget that happy childhood. You forget those happy memories of heaven from where you came. And so I guess that is what we can understand from this too. When he was a child, he could understand the truth of many things, and he communicated with the trees and stones. And the mystery sang alive, still in the water and singing birds. And there was something mysterious which only a child could understand in everything that he saw around him. So we should understand that now in his 30th year, he has kind of lost that ability to communicate with nature. Now in stanza 7, and there could I marvel my birthday away, but the weather turned around. He repeats that line once again. And the true joy of the long dead child sang burning in the sun. It was my 30th year to heaven, stood there then in the summer noon, though the town below lay leaved with October blood. So he says that as he stood there, he could still somehow experience at least a little bit of the joy of the long dead child. Why is the child long dead? Because childhood is gone. He has now matured into an adult. But as he stands there in the very same place where he used to spend his childhood, he feels that he can experience the true joy, at least a few remnants of the joy that that child used to enjoy. And that's why he says, and the true joy of the long dead child sang burning in the sun. So he can still feel the warmth. I would not say the heat, because heat has something ominous about it. So he still feels the warmth of that sun. Which sun? The sun of the summer when he was a little boy. And then he comes back and says, it was my 30th year to heaven. The opening line, you remember, the same thing. It was my 30th year to heaven. Stood there then in the summer noon, though the town below lay leaved with October blood. So he says, on my 30th birthday, as I stood there, I was actually standing in that summer of my childhood, and I could see the town from there. Down below, far away, I could see the town, and the town lay leaved with October blood, because October blood, October, because it is the month of October, and again it is the season of autumn where all the leaves are kind of red. Maybe that is what he means by October blood. Or maybe again he talks about the contemporary scene in the world, because this was the time when the World War was going on, or at least it was nearing its end. So the red may mean the violence of the contemporary world, the bloodshed, the war. So that is the reality. But at least for the time being, he is lost in a very happy summer of his childhood. Though the reality that lies, the town actually here represents reality. You remember in the beginning he said he crossed the borders. So the town is the reality. And when he crossed the border, the deeper he went into the woods, the higher he climbed into the hills, he was letting himself into another world, the world of his memories, the world of his happy childhood. So he says, though it is October, though the rest of the world is in the midst of autumn, as I stood there, I was in a summer season. Though the town below lay leaved with October blood. And then in the last three lines he says, oh, may my heart's truth still be sung on this high hill in a year's turning. So he says, I wish that my heart would continue to understand this truth of my heart would continue to live in the happy memories of my childhood. And even in the next year, in a year's turning, maybe the next year, my next birthday, I hope that I can revive the same feeling of happiness that I do now. Oh, may my heart's truth still be sung on this high hill in a year's turning. So may I be able to come back once again to this very same hill and once again talk happily about the happy bygone years as I come back next year. So that is how he ends the poem. Though there is a bit of bleakness that peeps in between, he somehow manages to revive his hope and happiness at the end of the poem. So that is how the poem in October ends. Now let us quickly take a look at the themes of the poem. So it is essentially a birthday poem because he wrote it maybe as a gift to himself to celebrate his 30th birthday. It is a celebration of life itself. He is celebrating his oneness with nature. He is, at least for a short period of time, cutting himself free of all his present woes and worries. He is moving away into a world of happiness. So you can feel that it's a celebration of all the happy memories of his happy past. And again, you can see this mingling of past and present. Then this oneness with nature, of how he says that I understood nature so well when I was a child. I used to speak to the river and the woods and the trees. So, and then again, life and death, right from the first line where he says 30th year to heaven, he sees life as a journey towards death. So that is there. And then in the end, you see that he can see some hope. He has hopes for the next year, for the future. He believes that this happiness will still be there when the next year comes. So on the whole, it is a poem that gives us a very optimistic feel. So that is the poem titled Poem in October.